Wishing you a lovely and good morning. A warm hello to all the attendees, guests, and friends. I hope you're feeling good and excited as I am. It is a great pleasure for me to declare the International Symposium open today. This symposium is a part of a bigger 4-year-long project about the contextualization of fashion, which is based in 4 content sections: identity of fashion, fashion in art, education in fashion system, and fashionista, Slovenian fashion. First, I would like to thank and welcome the initiator of the symposium and program manager, Associate Professor Tanja Devetak, for such a hard work, effort, and whole organization. I would also like to thank the scientific committee, Assistant Professor Dr. Ivana Bakal, Assistant Professor Dr. Marina Kocareva-Ranisavljev, and Associate Professor Dr. Damjana Celcar. Today's discussion topics, with the general title Identity, Fashion at Crossroads, will be related to the contextualization of fashion in forms of fashion and social, geographical, economic, political, historical, environmental, and cultural context. Discussion topics will be discussed with the forms of appearance of identity in fashion, such as sexual, social, production, professional, national, political, media, business, and sustainability. Identity and dress are intimately linked. Clothes display, express, and shape identity. They give us a sense of security in presenting ourselves in society. It also gives us power to present ourselves with identity we want. But before I turn over the conference to the first part of presentations, I would like to kindly ask Mr. Nate Auber, Deputy Director of Museum of Architecture and Design in Ljubljana, the host of today's symposium in this wonderful ambience, to say a few words.
Thank you. Dear ladies and gentlemen, dear distinguished guests, lecturers, and everybody on the other side of the cameras and screens, welcome to MAO. Museum of Architecture and Design is quite a young institution. This year we are celebrating 50 years of our beginnings. And our museum is dedicated to the fields of architecture, industrial design, graphic design, and architectural photography. So I can say that the fashion is a little bit outside of our regular scope. However, with our projects as Biennale of Design, and especially Center for Creativity, which is a support hub for all creative industries, including fashion, we are trying to regularly tackle also with the fields of fashion and to consider design in its broadest meaning. I'm especially happy that events as such, a symposium, Identity in Fashion, happen in our museum because they somehow complement our basic dedication, our basic fields of research, and they make our program more, how would I say, broad, more interesting, more open. So I wish you a fruitful day full of good lectures and discussions, and I hope it will be also a meaningful day with a good conclusion. Besides that, I would also like to invite everybody to the exhibition in the upper floor of our museum. It's exhibition about architect Jožef Plečnik. We have opened it only 3 weeks ago, and for now it is a very successful exhibition, so I'm sure you will take a look at it and have a few minutes or maybe even hours with architect Jožef Plečnik. Thank you. Have a nice day.
Thank you very much for this warm welcome and introduction to this symposium. Before we start, I would like to give some instructions. Each participant has 10 minutes for their presentation. I will ring at this bell once, 2 minutes before the end, so it would be a very gentle reminder. And then we will have a 10-minute discussion. I would like to start the symposium with our first presentation by Associate Professor Dr. Sonja Sterman from the Faculty of Mechanical Engineering in the University of Maribor, Slovenia. Associate Professor PhD Sonja Sterman is employed at the University of Maribor, Faculty of Mechanical Engineering, Institute of Design, and is the head of the Laboratory for Engineering Design of Product Design. She holds and teaches courses related to fashion, textiles, accessory, and product design. Her special area of interest is in the theory of sustainable and multifunctional design. Before her academic career, she worked as a fashion designer for the companies Mura, Rashita, and Elos Escada. She also specializes in the design of uniforms for companies, societies, and ministries. Her contribution to this symposium is titled Communication and Identity of Uniforms for Employees in Public Service, Industry, and Tourism. Welcome.
Hello, everybody, dear professors, dear students, dear guests. I'm happy to be here with you today. We will go through very quickly through self-definition, identity, corporate identity, and then we will see uniforms in different contexts. Of course, we will touch communication identity of uniforms, and then we will see through a few groups of uniforms that identity relates a lot. And today we are all expressing ourselves with what we are wearing. We can change our clothes every day and adapt clothing related to what we do, where we go. So that definition of personality can be emphasized and reinforced with our outfits. But what happens if people are working in uniforms? They couldn't do that. They have to wear wear also clothing and hairdressing and makeup in the way as the company said. So uniform overshadowed their personal identity. And so can you imagine how they feel? They couldn't express their own personality in the way we can do with our clothes. And preparing that lecture, I just asked questions. Did you ever happen to you that somewhere and the street was very common to you and you didn't know where you saw him before? Probably you saw him in some uniforms. So you know maybe this person here on the picture, do you know her? Yes, but for sure you know her in that uniform, a sport uniform representing Slovenia more. So in the case when people are uniformed, the personality is covered with the building blocks of the identity of the company, club, school, and that person represents in the particular workplace. And if we try to understand uniforms, what kind of relation people has to uniform people, 28% of people asked can more easily identify workers that are dressed in uniforms. And also 61% of them think that employees in uniforms have more confidence in their ability to do their jobs. And also people think that products are better if they are served by people who are dressed in uniforms. And also 55% of us trust employees in uniforms more than if they are not in uniform. And also people are more comfortable to ask about explaining purchase questions for employees that is in uniform. So we can see uniform has very strong identity. And as Bill Dunn said, it seems as though the modern world loves uniforms. We can see uniforms in different contexts. One is uniform related to history. We all know a lot of details that are like natural today that seems, oh, this is uniform, comes out from the history. And we can see here uniform, the first is, of course, uniform as functional and comfortable and combinatory clothing system that has to cover different types of uniforms for working, for ceremony, and for many different purposes. And of course, when we see uniforms, we have to know if that is the big group with size 6,000 employees like police, men, or we design for a very small group of uniforms. Here we have different users, different sizes, different long age and sex. So another context, as I said, is related to history and as uniforms as system of signs. Here we can see from the picture different bands, metal buttons, epaulets, different pockets. When we see clothing today that has these elements, we just think about that these details are known for uniforms. And of course, uniform we can see also related to fashion. So the style of uniforms is used as silhouette and in the form of details that define the uniform. We can see also a lot of casual clothing that has those kind of details. And of course, uniform as style and belonging to a group are very strong. We all know different groups, punkers and different groups that as a sign of belonging to that group, uniforms or their clothing has a big power. We can see uniform also as a form of communication. We can talk here about ideology of uniforms. So meaning of uniform is to show belonging to the group, and uniforms make that group powerful. In fashion, we can follow the functional and ideological values that build a recognizable style. So today's typical details of uniform, such as metal buttons, epaulets, badges, and other details, over the time come to denote status and are elements that we have become used to the point that we take them for granted in uniform design. And we can understand uniforms in different relations. So in the organization and out of society. So in the organization, we know position of the person, and out of in society, we can know what can we expect from the person. And in research, there are a lot of different articles that shows uniform, how it influences to the person who wear uniform, because they have another behavior in style of uniform, and also how people react to uniformed people and how they influence to the society. And uniformed person contribute to the identity of recognition of the company. They are all the time exposed to the reaction of society, and the garment shows what we can expect from a person. When you come to the hospital, we immediately know who is doctor, who is the nurse, who are ill people, or who are just visitors, because their clothes says about their position and also what we can expect from those people. And if we see quickly public workers, this is a big group of very different groups. Some of them work inside, some of them outside. Here are all repressive identities, doctors, firemen, drivers. So really a lot of different groups that have a lot of different requirements. I make one research related to repressive authorities, police, custom, and justice. So for people who wear guns also. So I make a survey what is important for uniforms for that group. And if one is not important, at 10 is very important, then you can see that quality and features and functionality of clothing is very high noted. And then it's important price and suppliers, because if we have big group of uniforms, suppliers are very important for continuation of fabrics. And then is communication power of uniform. And for some other, for example, for tourism, we know it is very important how they express, and this communication power is much higher. So for industrial workers, we could see very different groups of people. Everyone has to adapt to work places. And of course, tourism workers, they have to feel also comfortable in their uniforms, but they have to represent place or country that they represent. And I just will show you a case study, my design of uniforms for Spirit Slovenia for Expo Milano 2015. I think about these two sentences: feeding the planet, energy for life, promotional title of Expo Milano, and Slovenian promotional title, I feel Slovenia green, active, healthy. So I translate these promotional titles into design. And I was quite limited with colors, but I try to put something of each word. So you can see that design and also some pictures of this Expo Milano place. And I think the best thanks to the designer is if they said we loved that uniform and we wanted to wear, and we were happy to represent Slovenia in those clothing. So just for the end, I would like to express, because here is a lot of young designers, I just want to say, when designing, we have to know what is the company identity. And each designer should translate their wishes into visual language. So what does the company want to communicate through clothing? How do we translate wishes into design? What lines, colors, silhouettes, shapes, and details can represent their wishes? And of course, which materials will be good for their working conditions, and also cuts. So if I conclude with last sentence, to design uniform is to protect users and transfer visual language into corporate identity. Thank you very much. And thank you also, Tanya.
Thank you. And please welcome me for a little chat. So clothing can hold so much power, but how much power does a uniform have?
It works.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think uniform has very huge, very big power because as you see through examples, the power of group that one belongs, it goes over personal power of each person. So if we want to reach the power of the group, that must be uniformed.
By wearing corporate or uniform clothing, personal identity, as you said, overrides and becomes professional identity. Can we separate those two meanings? Is it hard to separate those two?
Yes, I think it's very hard to separate both, because if we see every person in the same uniformed group, everyone has another energy, personal energy. So we couldn't see like one. They have some another energy to the group. But if we see them standing as a group, they have very big power of the group. And I think it is not possible to separate this.
Yes. Uniforms help promote a sense of community and common identity. They help us identify professionals in different fields, and they help businesses create salient brands. Well-designed uniforms are not only functional, but encourage people to feel like a part of a group, as you said, with a common purpose. How powerful is psychological impact of uniform to the wearer?
Yes, it is a lot of studies that shows that uniforms have big power. So if we change the style of uniform, for example, jacket or military style of jacket, the psychological feeling is already different.
Yeah.
And if we change color, black and blue, they are very near, but it is already a big difference. For example, blue shows that the person is more open to be asked some questions, and black is just have a barrier between people.
So I hope I don't have today.
I think this black in the fashion world is in another context. But if we see uniform, for example, policemen in black or in blue, a survey shows that people ask easily a uniform person in blue than in black. But authority, if we would like to make and build a strong authority, then black is the one. For example, if we stay at the area of police uniform, special forces will have black. And policemen that helps us in everyday life, they have blue.
Okay. But some of them abuse this power of uniform. So where is the line?
Yes, I think that through history, some people abused their position. It was, and I hope that one day we finish with that behavior. But I think that if every person do on to becoming everyday better person, then also this maybe what happened was that they will realize that we just have to do good in uniform or without.
In recent decades, various military styles in particular have begun to influence fashion, as we've seen before, which expresses a different meaning and function. For example, in the 60s, Yves Saint Laurent designed the famous button-down jacket and influenced the military-inspired clothing of other designers such as Balmain, Givenchy, Prada, Burberry, and so on. What does this mean for the status and the power of the uniforms?
I think that this jacket, as you exposed, we have jacket now in fashion, in uniforms, it's everywhere. But in fashion, it could adapt to trends quickly. It is similar from year to year, but it can adapt in some small details. Maybe buttons difference is different, maybe length of the model is different, or just shape. But in uniforms, it stays there for a longer time, because if we were a group of a lot of people. We couldn't change and replace every year with new style. We have uniform for maybe 15 years, the same, or just slightly modernized, but they couldn't change for so many people uniforms in 1 year. So I think it is still difference.
What about school uniforms? School uniforms are believed to be a practice which dates to the 16th century in United Kingdom. Proponents say that school uniforms make schools safer for students, create a level playing field that reduces socioeconomic disparities, and encourage children to focus on their studies rather than their clothes. Opponents say school uniforms infringe upon students' right to express their individuality, have no positive effect on behavior and academic achievement, and emphasize the socioeconomic disparities they are intended to disguise. So what is your opinion about that? Should we promote personal identity by younger generations, or it would be easier with collective identity?
I think we have to build the possibility to express personal identity. I think that everywhere is already direction to be unitized. So I think we have supported their personality. Yeah. I was asked similar questions already. If I support uniforms in society, in schools or not. I was always not to have uniforms. But a friend of mine, she had children in the kindergarten with some uniforms. She said, oh, it's so easily. I don't need to think what to wear next day. So there are pluses and minuses. But I think it's fine to support this, especially by young generation, that they are open to colors, to different styles, that they discover their own style also.
Yeah. And also that they have a freedom.
Yeah, and that they have freedom, yeah.
Thank you very much for this lovely conversation on such an interesting topic, and wishing you all the best on your professional path.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me.
I would like to welcome the second participant of today's symposium, Assistant Professor Magister Dejla Ramić, who will present us with the theme of migration and cultural identity. Assistant Professor Magister Dejla Ramić is employed in the position of Assistant Professor at the Technical Faculty of University of Bihać in Bosnia and Herzegovina from 2016. From 2018 to 2022, she is the head of the Textile Department of the Technical Faculty in Bihać. In 2021, she enrolled in the interdisciplinary doctoral study Modern Production Technologies at the Technical Faculty in Bihać. She is the coordinator of annual student fashion shows and workshops as a part of art courses. And from September 2022, she is acting as a local coordinator of the CIPUS network, and she actively also participates in the projects of the International Organization for Migration, IOM. Dejla Ramić will present her contribution with the title Migration and Cultural Identity. Please.
Thank you, Maya. One of the most visible and universal ways people express themselves is through clothing. Clothing conveys information about an individual personality, group, membership, and even in the context of social situations. Research suggests that clothing is the part of dynamic social process linked to ethnic identity, religious identity, and self-esteem. The Zmieni design project was created as a need to preserve the intangible cultural heritage of Bosnia and Herzegovina, but also as a need for the cultural identity of the early emergence of a new generation of actors in migration process, such as the third generation of migrants from these areas. Members of the third generation of migrants show an interest in the culture of their parents' identity, searching for their origin and sense of belonging, but also for the most important thing that marks them. The approach to this project is based on the inspiration of snake connection, construction, which is included in UNESCO list of intangible cultural heritage. By integrating the motif of snake embroidery in contemporary clothing and deconstructing elements of folk costume, the students of textile department of Technical Faculty in Bihać created a collection that clearly shows ethnicity, but also the use of traditional sign in contemporary context. Cultural heritage is of great importance due to its multiplicity, which is posed on several levels. It is the barrier of the identity of a certain human community. And at the same time, it proves and shows the historical extent of some human communities in certain area. Of course, cultural heritage bears the characteristic of the past times, but it also bears the characteristic of modernity. Fashion and clothing are one of the ways in which people want to preserve their inner freedom and identity in the conditions of increasing global and oppression. The concept of identity implies an answer to the question of who I am, who I want to be, and or who I could possibly be. Migrants from Bosnia and Herzegovina today represent one of the most numerous immigrants communities from the territory of the former Yugoslavia. The very arrival of the first generation of migrants in a new environment and complete abandonment of the previous norms and social system is not simple. The transition from the socialist system to the capitalist state is ignorance of the language, laws, customs, and habits made it difficult for them to integrate more deeply into society itself. For second generation migrants, the adaptation process wasn't adapted. Nor was the degree of the integration into the host society. The third generation of migrants, thanks to the sacrifice of their parents, enjoyed the value occurred in the culture of the host country, but at the same time show interest in the culture of their parents and searching for their origin and identity. We can also see an example of highlighting ethnic affiliation through clothing in other minorities, which they use to express their affiliation. The traditional embroidery from Zmijanje design was inscribed as an intangible world heritage on the UNESCO list of intangible world heritage in Europe of November 2014 in Paris. The Zmijanje design or snake connection includes respect for diversity, creativity, and non-verbal communication. It also has sentimental and emotional value, especially for displaced population who use embroidery dresses as an expression of national and local identity and pride. Embroidery ties together many elements of cultural heritage, such as music, rituals, oral tradition, handicrafts, and symbolism. Lectures and workshop in Bihać and Banja Luka. Imaginarium Studio, a design and art studio from Banja Luka, led by architect and designer Aleksandar Jankovic, is actively working on the project Zmijanje Design, which reinterprets the heritage of the Zmijanje weaving. From December 2021, the Department of Textile and the Imaginarium Studio are conducting joint activities on the mentioned project. The students were presented with the methods and techniques of creating a clothing collection inspired by cultural heritage. During the clothing design project 1 course, the students worked on conceptual design solutions, after which models were selected for production and marketing on the commercial market. On workshop, we work on activities in field of preservation of Zmijanje, creation of zero-waste brand Zmijanje design, market target group migrations, the need to preserve traditional value, the need to pass on the knowledge of the serpent connection, the need for cultural identification. And after that, we have planned and program a workshop through the design process. getting to know the relationship and its reinterpretation into a modern concept, familiarization with materials for students for their mini collection, target group research, development of an idea from a fashion drawing to a technical drawing and technical documentation, construction and model making, presentation of works at the faculty, and finally fashion show and exhibition in Bihać and Banja Luka. These are pictures from a workshop on our university in Bihać. Our final product for Zmijanje design. And these are student works from University Bihać. These are pictures from exhibition in Banja Luka. And after that in Bihać.
So would you please join me for a little chat? The term authentic contemporary heritage is nowadays very often used. Is this necessary to preserve the heritage, especially for younger generations? It must be something modern, something contemporary. So is this very important?
I will speak on Bosnian.
Yeah.
Jako je bitno za sve generacije, prvenstveno one koje su migrirale i koje u principu traže pored muzike, pored tih nekih drugih elemenata da na neki način u svoj sadržaj, u svoj život uključe nešto što je tradicionalno, ali isto tako i na neki način savremeno. Prvenstveno zato uvijek vežemo nekako odjeću, jer odjeća ipak nosi određene poruke, a sa tim malim detaljima koje smo povezali zmijanje i neki savremeni koncept, jednostavno dolazimo do ciljne grupe koja u stvari i traži takav način za izražavanje. Nije nastalo ništa spontano, nego smo prvenstveno na osnovu istraživanja populacije treće migracije pokušali da napravimo modele koji će odgovarati na komercijalnom tržištu i koji će se na neki način prodavati najviše u Banja Luci.
She said that this contemporary heritage term is very important nowadays, especially for migrants.
Of course.
And fashion is so fluently and so well accepted also in younger generations, and this is a tool of communication. So it's very important to wear this heritage in a sense of contemporary fashion. Zmijanje embroidery is a specific technique practiced by the women of Zmijanje villages in Bosnia and Herzegovina. And the main characteristic is the use of a thread in deep blue color, handmade with vegetable dyes to embroider improvised geometrical shapes. Which dye is used and what do the geometrical shapes represent? Did you use also the blue color or it was black?
Krenut ćemo iz početka. Prvenstveno zmijanje je prvenstveno bilo u crnoj boji. Znači, prvo se koristila crna boja koja se godinama koristila kao tradicionalni znak za zmijanje vez, prvenstveno zato što smo je dobili prirodnim putem od kuhanja samog jasena. Znači, mala domaćinstva u određenim periodima nisu imali druge mogućnosti, nego se radilo sve prirodnim putem, znači prirodnim bojama. Sve do momenta dok Austro-Ugarska vojska nije došla na to područje, ona je sa svojim dolaskom i donijela crnu boju, plavu boju. plavu boju koja je znači korištena za uniforme samih vojnika, a onda su se poslije znači i žene koje su s područja Banja Luke znači koristile u zmijanju. Tako da u principu ta plava je boja dosta onako novija nego ta crvena.
Da ću prevesti samo.
A što se tiče geometrijskih elemenata, geometrijski elementi su već dugi niz godina znači na tom području korišteni znači u više varijanti, ne samo kroz zmijanje, nego su oni već od samog neolita nekako iskorišteni da bi se u principu slagala ta geometrija.
Podobno i sveta geometrija.
Da.
The color blue, she said that first was the black color, and that was before the Austro-Hungarian Hungarians came to this area with their uniforms. There were all sorts of colors, bright colors and also blue, and the influence of blue color through these uniforms were adopted, as in blue. So this geometry is from Neolithic area, and it's still very fashionable. It's still very pleasant to the eye and to the soul. No, because symmetry is geometry. Zbijanje embroidery is described in 2014 on the representative list of the intangible cultural heritage of humanity. What attitude do young people, especially students, your students, have towards heritage, and how important is heritage in a contemporary context for younger generations? How students of the textile department of the technical faculty in Bihać went about researching and designing their creations? Did they feel this expression of national and local identity and pride?
Tu je jedan mali problem. Bosna je podijeljena u više dijelova, tako da u principu studenti univerziteta u Bihaću su radili nešto što pripada nacionalno pripada Republici Srpskoj. U principu ovo je bila samo jedna saradnja gdje smo na neki način pokušali da izgradimo određeni odnos između različitih ustanova, između privatne ustanove kao što je Imaginarium Studio i Tehničkog fakulteta u Bihaću, posebno dizajna, gdje smo na način da kao i sve projekte koje smo do sada radili, u principu krenuli sa onim najjednostavnijim procesom, a to je u stvari dizajniranjem određenih elemenata, i gdje je u stvari sva ta priča oko zmijanja dizajn na neki način njima već kroz par mjeseci rada sa njima i sa upoznavanjem svih tih elemenata bila dosta zanimljiva. Tako da u principu počeli su da radi na drugim projektima koji su na neki način više vezani, na primjer, za tradicionalne bosanske čilime, i koji se isto vežu za geometriju, prvenstveno za geometriju, a onda za floralni dizajn. Tako da je to bio jedan dobar uvod u stvari upoznavanje, znači određenog identiteta, znači određenih manjina, jer sve na neki način su to manjine koje u stvari čine određenu grupu koja u stvari stvara te elemente, a koje mi uzimamo kao svoj identitet.
So it was very difficult to identify with students for this local zmiljanje design because the Bosnia and Herzegovina is parted in different ethnical areas, and this was so very difficult for young students. And the research was mainly focused on the geometrical shapes in which they researched, and then in component in fashion. So, as you said, Imaginarium Studio and the Textile Department have been collaborating on the Zmijanje design project since December 2021. And Zmijanje design collection by Imaginarium Studio was introduced in the fashion show at the Citadela Plateau in the very heart of the city of Banja Luka. I saw the video, so modern and so great. But without the audience, during the strict COVID-19 restriction period under the police supervision. This was the pioneering venture in the whole region of Balkans. What was the reaction of the society about that? Your students did also fashion show in the heart of the streets of Bihać?
Yeah.
And how is it different to have a fashion show inside or outside?
Apsolutno je isto, samo što je proces drugačiji kada je u pitanju publika koja u stvari doživljava to nešto kao svoje i nešto što su radili studenti tekstilnog odsjeka. Sada stvar je bila da se naprave određeni modeli koji će na neki način zadovoljiti određenu publiku, tako da u principu tamo jedna revija koja se desila u Banjoj Luci, koja je prezentirala te iste radove i imala puno većeg odjeka kod same publike, jer je upravo bilo i namijenjena toj publici. Znači, treća generacija koja dolazi kod svojih, ne znam, djedova, baka, ili koja dođe jednom godišnje da posjeti svoje porodice, na neki način je upoznavala, znači nešto što čim želi da se na neki način ih poveže, a to je u principu pored muzike, pored običaja, pored, ne znam, kola, svakako znači i izvijanje.
Traditionally, Izmir embroidery is used to decorate female costumes and household items, including wedding dresses, scarves, garments, bed linen. Contemporary art includes the integration of these specific motifs in fashion clothing and also in jewelry, for example, Dukan Nakit from Sarajevo. How important is a brand and a good marketing of a brand, especially on the topic of heritage nowadays?
Danas je sve u tome. Danas mnoge stvari ovise o tome, ali je i super što na neki način možemo dobiti jako puno informacija, znači od samog brenda, jer prodajom, marketingom, ciljnim populacijama u stvari imamo puno više informacija kako bi na neki način kreirali određene predmete.
So it is very important to have a good brand, to have a good marketing, to have a great photos also of the brand and design. So thank you very much for this pleasant conversation.
Thank you.
And wishing you also all good on your professional path.
Thank you.
Now I would like to welcome the third participant of the first part of today's symposium, Associate Professor Tanja Devetak. She will present the topic of Fashionista, National Fashion Identity in Context of Space. Tanja Devetak is an associate professor in the field of clothing and textile design. She is an external lecturer at the Faculty of Design, an independent higher education institution. She has received international awards for her work in regular exhibits at solo and group exhibitions. She works as an independent researcher at the Center of Design Research in the field of the history of Slovenian fashion, decolonization of fashion, and the sustainable context of the fashion system. She participates in projects that are part of a wider contemporary design context. She is currently finishing her doctoral studies at the University of Ljubljana. Tanja Devetak will present her contribution on the theme Fashionista, National Fashion Identity in Context of Space. Tanja, welcome.
Good morning, everyone, and it's good to see you here and also online. I will be presenting, in my own words, the national identity that has emerged in Slovenia, and I called it Fashionista, and I will talk it through the building of Fashionista in the context of space, which I think it's a very important supposition for the fashion, as it equal also to the body and to the time. But why actually we are talking about space? So the space is not only the physical space in which we move, we can feel it, we have some kind of a connection towards our bodies, but it's also the space which we cannot touch, but we have the notion of it in the context of, in the social context, in geographic context, economic context, historical context, environmental context, and cultural context. I will explain shortly in my presentation what I was thinking by that, but in shortly, this abstract value of space, according to the fashion, is embedded in relationships that we as individuals also make in interaction with the society in which we are placed, or we live in, or we are part of the communities. So building the fashionista in Slovenian national identity started many decades ago, first through the social context. As was mentioned before, the system that we were living in, of course, was very strongly connected with the different social stratas, and also it was the focal point of the whole system, formation. In that sense, of course, Slovenian fashion identity has started to build up in the early 70s with some starting points in the late 60s. Because at that time, first fashion designers emerged in the industry, and also first secondary educational programs in the field of fashion in Slovenia has started their programs. Here we can see in the building of fashionista some of the examples of the time, and some of the brands that has emerged at that time. And if we would compare those clothing forms seen on those pictures, we can easily make their Western examples at the same time. But also fashionista at that time, which, as you can see, is also differently written. It's not the word that we know as fashionista, as the one who is following global fashion trends. In Slovenian case, in building of national fashion identities, this fashionista actually was following the local trends, which emerged in the creativity of the fashion designers at that time. If we are looking from the perspective of the geographical context of the space, which is reflected then in the building of fashion identity, we have to say the Slovenian fashion is rather small fashion, not just in the sense of symbolic value. This is the comparison to Italy, and the circles marks the revenue by the Statista in 1991. So the size of Italy in the global context is 15, is their ranking in the 15 place, comparing to Slovenian fashion, which is the 75th place. So it's a huge difference among those national fashion identities. But of course, also in symbolic value, because globally we all see that Milan, as one of the 4 major centers, fashion centers, is placed in Italy. And of course, if we say made in Italy, it has another meaning saying or comparing to made in Slovenia. And in that sense, we have to talk about decolonization of fashion, which takes place not just in the production or the way how we manage the labor laws connecting to the fashion production, but also in the symbolic ways. We have to be very aware of the meaning and be proud of the meaning of the Slovenian fashion as it emerged on a special and specific cultural backgrounds. In that sense, of course, we can look at the 70s, in the 70s of the last century, where all of the Slovenian fashion identity has emerged, and also today has its impact. In the economic context of the space, some of the good examples has emerged not just in the production way, but also in distribution sense. Here are the examples of do-it-yourself activities that has been placed from the fashion brand Almira and the fashion designer at the time in this brand, Vesna Gabarczyk, who started the projects of the hand-knitted projects and involved people around the Slovenia to participate in the open calls for the competitions. Some of the later important artists also participated in those competitions. One of them also Ksenia Baraga. And this was important because today we speak a lot about do it yourself, do it together. So some ways of implementing sustainable methodologies and also strategies in the fashion design of today. And this is the example of different approaches in the economic context of space, which includes the distribution, one of the four pillars of fashion design. The other three, production and design, the education, and the media. And this is the example of how in Slovenia, in the forming of national fashion identity, as I call it, fashionista, has emerged the fashion collection, the fashion brand within the fashion media. This was Ars Vivendi, one of the rare independent fashion medias in Slovenia, who started its own fashion brand. This is really unique in a worldwide examples that you have a fashion media which starts its own fashion brand with its own also fashion distribution. So you can hear its own shops. One of them was also Modna Hiša, who started with its own fashion labels. The next context of the space, which is very important for the building of national identity, is historical context. In this way, of course, is taking place also this Simposium in museums. In Slovenia, and we have museums on a national national level, but also on the regional and city level that holds some collections of Slovenian fashion. Among them, a very important and the largest archive of Slovenia, of the fashion in Slovenia region, is a regional museum of Maribor. As one of the curators is also Marjan Brvar, that is moderating this symposium of today. And I'm presenting here also the starting of the digital archive of Slovenian fashions that I'm running with the Center of Design Research, because I feel it's important that we also have these fashion designers which were in many cases hidden behind the brands and not really seen who they are with their names and surnames, and especially with their faces, their presentations. And here is just the photos of some of them of the beginning of this digital archive of Slovenian fashions that is now taking place. And I hope in the near future will also be recognized on the national level, that it is important to establish on the national level the fashion museums. As we speak in the environmental context of building fashionista, this was a research done 2 years ago of the Slovenian fashion today, and some data that were collected. Slovenian fashion identity of today is very much sustainable oriented, although it's not a highly marketized, or it's not highly marketing in a highly marketing position with all those datas and facts that actually holds that are holding fashion brands in Slovenia. But if we are talking with the usage of some like short supply chains or local production chains, or regarding the connection to the involvement of the users in the design process, Slovenian fashion national identity fashionista is really sustainable, sustainably in a surplus if you compare to other nearby fashion systems. Also, in respect of ethical and principles and moral principles, of course, we are following high laws regarding that with the production order. And coming to the end of my production, thank you, Maya, for reminding me. Of course, we have to talk also about the cultural context of fashionista. This cultural context of fashionista was always very highly connected with the subcultural definition of fashion. There are some examples. Very highly was this recognized in the 80s. And today, some of the fashion brands and fashion designers are strongly connected to the subculture and are sending it into their brands. So to summarize and finish my presentation, the Slovenian national identity is fashionista, is the fashion, following fashion trends, but from the perspective from the East. It has its origins, of course, in the 70s, but and follow through the 80s and 90s, and is strongly in this millennium connected to the space, this abstract space of Slovenia as we know today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So would you please come and chat with me for a little bit? So what is national fashion identity with in Slovenia? Can we talk about Slovenian fashion? What is Slovenian fashion? What are influences to Slovenian fashion? Are there Austrians or Hungarians or more Italy, because we are so located in these borders? All are ethnical groups, or can we talk about Slovenian fashion identity?
If we follow the research and the data from the past, from the history, if we are following the brands today, how they make their fashion design or the process, we can definitely say we have national fashion identity. But of course, we have to look at it from the inner perspective and from the outer perspective. The fashion identity, if we say, yes, we do have national fashion identity, of course, this is the inner perspective. From the outer perspective, nobody really knows what Made in Slovenia means. But this is just the way how we have to market our national fashion identity, and not the value that we hold, but how we present ourselves. As I have said before, of course, many of the brands, they don't even present their work as sustainable, but they have many aspects of it. Yeah. So it's just the way how we present ourselves, not if we do hold this identity, national identity. There are some points that, of course, do point or support this, my argument. First of all, if we look from history, we always had these local production chains. We always followed the local production chains from different reasons, but nevertheless, at the end, the result was the short supply chains or the production chains. We always followed some cultural heritage. There were collections throughout the history of Slovenian fashion that have these connections. We always had supportive consumers that, of course, has its respect for the Slovenian fashion. What we lacked is the outer perspective. So how we can be proud of our Slovene fashion identity and show with no, how to say, you know, we have to be not just proud, but also very focused in these global fashion trends, saying, yes, we do exist. And it is important that you know us, you know, a bit more higher self-esteem in the fashion national
in every areas.
In every areas, probably, yes.
So you mentioned before that designers that were established in 60s, 70s were hidden. What about today? What are today's contemporary Slovenian fashion designers?
Well, the problem is, of course, if in the past their market was much broader. I mean, much more million people were potential consumers of their work. And also at that time, they were presenting their work on very respectful fairs, and some of them really gained major awards for their work, and rightfully, of course. Today's fashion is more about names, but not about regular production, which of course is a problem if we're talking about the fashion system, about the fashion, because fashion needs regularity in production, in presentation. We cannot have names which every now and then produce fashion collections which are great, which are respectful, which can be really compared to any global collection at the time, but they have no regularity in time. So they, for example, this year they show the collection, maybe next year they will not show, or even worse, they are not selling those clothes. They're just for the show, and that's it. You know, they don't live up from their work. So I think today they are visible. So fashion designers are visible with their names, surnames, faces, not so much with their brands. But in the past, the brands were really strong and without faces and without names and surnames of the people who were behind the production and the design.
Are there many contemporary Slovenian fashion designers that succeed in the world?
Yes, they are. And surprisingly, they are. They've been through many years. Some of them, I won't name them, but of course they were trying to come back, and nobody in Slovenia really wanted them, so they went back abroad. We have a good educational system in fashion design, and all of those people are successful abroad in the global fashion world. But I think it's important that also here we start to mark the fashion as a very important economic force. This is not just a cultural force, but it's an economic force. And that, of course, reflects the society, reflects these abstract values of the space. And we have to recognize fashion as one of the forces that, as a part of design, that was also heard today, as a part of design that can change the society, the space that we live in. And as soon as we will acknowledge that and start to respect fashion design as one of the creative industries, the better our society will live. No matter how funny this may be is heard, but also that will follow the economic part. Because all those people behind fashion system that we have now, of course, cannot participate in the same structure, in the same force as they would if we would appreciate their work and, of course, open our space for their creativity.
Thank you very much for this lovely
Maya.
conversation.
And thank you all.
And wishing you all the best on your projects. And
Thank you.
now I would like to announce a well-deserved coffee break. And we will continue with the second part of Welcome back. I hope you had a pleasant pause. Now we will continue with our presentations. A warm welcome to our next guest, Mr. Stefan Žarić, a PhD candidate in Faculty of Philosophy at the University of Novi Sad in Serbia, who undertook and devoted himself to an interesting topic, our First Lady of the East, political incorrectness of Melania Trump's fashion identity. Stefan Žarić is a fashion historian and PhD candidate at the University of Novi Sad, where he researches fashion in Shakespeare's great tragedies and their representations in haute couture. Besides studying art history in Serbia, Estonia, and the USA, Stefan has further specialized in fashion history in the UK and Japan. He curated the first haute couture exhibition in Serbia, Jean-Paul Gaultier, and currently serves as a broad member of ICOM Costume Committee and fashion history contributor at Elle Serbia. Stefan Žarić will present his contribution on the theme Our First Lady of the East, Political Incorrectness of Melania Trump's Fashion Identity. Welcome.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me. It is really lovely to be here. The last time I was here, I went to Regional Museum of Maribor with Maya in 2019, where we had a similar conference. I'm glad I can represent a millennial generation of fashion historians coming besides the solidified Western curtain, as I would say. Tanya, you might agree with me on this. I was thinking about a subject that I would present upon coming here when Professor Devetak invited me. And I thought there's probably no better place to talk about all the glory of Melania Trump's fashion than her native Slovenia, of course. And as myself have lived a lot in the United States, where I went to high school and college, and coming from a country to which I always had to explain that it's not Siberia or Syria, but Serbia, I thought I would just talk about political correctness, cancel culture, liberal hysteria, and everything that is consuming our society. When yesterday Tanya picked me up from the airport after passing through a rigorous check being outside of European Union as a Serbian citizen, we passed by your parliament building, which I thought was a Swedish embassy because there was Ukrainian flag in front of it. I couldn't figure it was a Ukrainian flag. I thought it was Swedish embassy or at least Ukrainian embassy. Then I realized that Slovenia is part of a global identity crisis and hysteria, which I think is quite summed up in what Melania Trump or our image of her represents. So how do we, okay. In order to speak, and I, of course, as you see, I titled my presentation, Our First Lady of the East, thinking about, of course, of Melania Trump, but as well the, the religious syntagm, Nasha Gospa, all right, and Yugoslav languages. In order to speak about Melania Trump, I think that we have to refer to her common signifier and mother of all the first ladies that came after, and not many did come after. It's, of course, Jovanka Broz, former President Tito's wife. With all this ongoing hysteria, I don't know, maybe did you recently see, as Tanya, you followed on my Facebook profile, there was a special edition of Belgrade Fashion Week. If you're not familiar, Belgrade Fashion Week is the oldest fashion week and the first of its kind in the entire Eastern Europe. So from Moscow to Istanbul, Ljubljana, Budapest, Bucharest, the one in Belgrade starting in 1996 was the first. And a few days ago, there was a special edition of Belgrade Fashion Week devoted to Jovanka Broz. All the designers gathered, not just from Serbia, but former Yugoslav states as well, were invited to imagine how Jovanka would look like on a contemporary runway. I don't know, do you recognize the other person? It's the person who represented us at Eurovision this year. Just to be mentioned, We Will Never Forgive You for giving Italy 12 points and not to Serbia. This is Constructa, who sang in Corpore Sano. She opened the runway by representing Jovanka Broz, and this leads us to our beloved lady, and the trouble we have with Jovanka today is the same one that we have with Melania. When I posted on my Facebook about, as I work for Elle, the fashion magazine, when I posted my review of the show, a lot of my friends from the West, so a lot of very white privileged people, called me a fascist or a Nazist. As I have studied in Estonia, and Estonia suffers from kind of similar historical complex as Slovenia and Croatia upon entering European Union. I'm sorry, I'm very politically incorrect, as you will see. So they don't like to be called Eastern European. They don't like, same as I guess Slovenia doesn't like to be called Balkan or post-Yugoslav. So a lot of my friends from Estonia have removed me from Facebook and wrote a really bad comments when I posted a fashion runway of Jovanka Broz, because one of the creations had a symbol of communism, Srepi Čekić, right, hammer and sickle, a symbol that is nowadays forbidden by law in Estonia, which equates Nazism with communism as oppressive regimes. And this led me to think a lot about contemporary hysteria that is very much present in the image of Melania Trump. When Melania Trump assumed her role as the first lady, she became the first person of Yugoslav and more particularly Slovenian origin to become the first lady of, I think, not just America, but one Western country, and the first professional model to do so. This was, of course, taken a lot against her, and I think that in America, people did not know much about Slovenia, same as they don't know about Serbia. I think that Melania Trump really brought a lot of colonial discourse into understanding of the, is it already 8 minutes?
No.
Okay. Oh, that was your, okay, sorry. And Melania Trump brought a lot of this. For her inauguration in January 2020, she wore this gorgeous Ralph Lauren dress. And since this moment, there has been a lot of cancel culture discourse around her, like what designers should design for her. And of course, Democratic elites in America were very quick to discredit every single designer who would design for her. But we must also not forget that designers would not necessarily directly design for a person, but the person can simply go and buy something in a democratic society, right? Here we can see more of it. And recently, if you're familiar with Met Gala, the annual fashion exhibition at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, this year was very controversial because of Kim Kardashian and Marilyn Monroe dress. And the subject was In America, Ontology of Fashion. Exhibition was supposed to represent the cultural and political identity of the US. And of course, curators and director of the museum, they were first to say how this dress must not be exhibited by all means. It would be so inappropriate. And I think, on the contrary, it would be perfect to have, for example, this dress next to Jacqueline Kennedy, pink suit. I think it would be marvelous trajectory. Another idea that stems from all this political incorrectness is, of course, Melania being a Slavic person, an Eastern European person, a Yugoslav person. And here we can see her wearing a dress by a Serbian designer when you, Maya, and Tanya talked about the visibility of Slovenian designers in the world. And I think that probably when it comes to Serbia, this is a dress by Roksanda Ilinčić. She now resides in London. Roksanda has dressed Kate Middleton, Madame Macron. She has dressed Michelle Obama. And I think it was really a peculiar curiosity for Melania Trump to choose a dress by a former Yugoslav or a fellow Yugoslav designer as well. This was for the Republican National Convention just before the Trump would become president. And of course, all the Western media was talking about how as not fair that Melania as first lady would wear non-American designers, unlike today we have with Jill Biden, who is fully wearing just American designers. Why we should be careful who we dress. On this image, we can as well see a creation by Roksanda Ilinčić. If you're not familiar, in Serbia, we have a prime minister who is lesbian. So this is her partner. This is L'Officiel Arabia. As you know, in Saudi Arabia, homosexuality is punished by law. So I think that it speaks a lot about political incorrectness. And I wanted to ask myself if Roksanda Ilinčić, the designer who now lives in London with British citizenship, and has this privilege, if she was living maybe in Slovenia or Serbia, would we cancel her for dressing such problematic political figures as a Serbian Prime Minister, Ana Brnabić is her name, or Melania Trump. This is just a side information. Roksanda has as well dressed, as you can see, Michelle Obama. This was just a few days ago. I was dying when I saw this. It's like so perfect, this image on so many levels. This was just a few days ago on Michelle Obama's book promotion. And when Melania appeared in this dress, the same dress was worn by Michelle Obama a few years ago when she was the first lady married to, as she still is, to former President Barack. So a lot of Western media at one point said it's so very bad for Melania to be dressed by a Serbian or Yugoslav. Or I'm not sure, maybe Tanya, you can tell, was she ever dressed by a Slovene designer? I think that she hasn't been. So we can have this as a question, why not or why yes. And then Michelle Obama wore Serbian design on several occasions. And I must also say, speaking in terms of visibility of Serbian fashion, in terms of first ladies, probably the most famous Serbian fashion designer ever, he's considered father of British and Scottish textile industry, Bernard Klein, has designed the tweed for many of Jackie Kennedy's suit as well. So we had two designers dressing three first ladies of the USA. And I entitled this a title, Diesel Dreams. As you know, in the 90s, there was a lot of diesel culture, dieselashi and gastarbajteri in Yugoslavia. And I think it's just funny how people took so much against Melania for being a Yugoslav, for being a Slovenian. If you've been in America before or after or during Trump's presidency, a lot of people would just consider Melania Russian, but as an insult, especially now with everything going on in Ukraine. So I thought it's really funny to see Michelle Obama styled as she's looking like she's going to sell fake perfumes in Belgrade. Like, at least it looks like that to me. In her, we call this shushkovac, you know, the trenerka.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I understand. And this leads us to these ongoing politically incorrect fashion wars. Yeah, great. We're gonna finish. As you know, Melania Trump, despite being the first professional fashion model, she has never appeared on Vogue. You know that Anna Wintour is one of the biggest sponsors of American Democratic Party. If you saw recently the new episodes of Sex and the City. It's called Just Like That, I think. And there was this very unnerving moment at the beginning, the first episode. And, you know, everyone is genderqueer and non-binary and Irish American, Mexican refugee, all this identity politics. You know, I myself am half Ukrainian and a queer person, just not to think that this is such identities. And there's a scene in which Carrie Bradshaw is opening the show with her latest iPhone, and then on the iPhone is a sticker of Democratic Party. A few days after that, of course, Biden assumed the position as new president, and Jill Biden, after Kamala Harris appeared on Vogue. These flowers on her dress should represent, I guess, 50 states of America or something. So she was sending much different message than Melania, who was choosing European designers, and particularly Eastern or fashion Eastern European designers. Then on the other side, we have, I really don't know how to comment on this. Olena Zelenska on the cover of Vogue. Both our photos are photographed by Amy Leibovitz. So I just thought that this is an interesting trajectory. Melania Trump did appear on a cover of magazine. Ironically, it was Vanity Fair, right? So I thought this was beautiful. And she's not the designer who needs, I guess she's not the one who needs to be on Vogue after all. It leaves us with a lot of bitterness and high hopes and high heels. This is the last official outfit Melania wore as the first lady. I'm just going to move from microphone, but I guess with my baritone profundo, you're gonna hear. So she's wearing Christian Louboutin shoes. She has been wearing these heels for 4 years during her service. She has Hermes Birkin bag. She has a jacket by Chanel and dress by Dolce & Gabbana. So very close to European fashion designers. So there's nothing American on the most fashionable American first lady here. And this look, she just killed it. And of course, fashion media was not even reporting on this, but they were reporting about Jill, which was so boring, and Michelle Obama, and the little poet, Amanda Gorman, who was reciting the poem. And they were all wearing designs by American immigrants and stuff like this. And then before she entered the plane, this was in the White House, and leaving home to Florida, she has appeared for the first time in just ballerinas. And I thought it was such a powerful statement for Melania Trump to appear, and this is a Gucci dress, so again, not American design, to show this immobility of our ideas and how much we read into this political incorrectness. And I think the fashion is really here to remind us that with a lot of freedom, I think, comes great responsibility, and not vice versa. And this is something that her stylist called bipartisan dressing. I think this probably must be one of my favorite terms in fashion history, in which he, of course, being on the target for 4 years for dressing a fascist, I guess. And then he said that bipartisan dressing should actually kind of separate politics from fashion, and I think this is wrong. I think this must be united, and this is, I think, probably one of my favorite moments. Melania Trump appeared in a 30 euros Zara jacket while visiting a center for immigrant children in Texas, and it said, "I really don't care, do you?" And I thought it was just such a powerful statement. I will not even comment on this. And she didn't want to comment when asked. Of course, Western media said, "Oh my God, she went to see immigrant children and she told them, I don't care." Well, those children were there before Trump assumed the office, same as the very atrocious border between America and Mexico, and same as nowadays problems between Moscow and Kiev. So maybe just think about it. And my question to you would be, do you really care? Thank you so much. This is it for me.
Thank you. So please. So, First Lady Melania Trump has been a controversial figure during her time at the White House. And she began stirring controversy with her style prior to Trump taking office. And one of the most widely criticized fashion choices came during the second 2016 presidential debate between Trump and Hillary Clinton. The First Lady chose to wear a fuchsia Gucci bow blouse. Just days after the infamous Access Hollywood, a tape leaked that showed Trump making vulgar comments. And would it be different if this blouse was worn by Michelle Obama.
Of course. I mean, we all know this because they wore the same dress by Roxanda, and
Yeah.
there was, in case of Michelle, it was always, she was compared to Kate Middleton because we know that Roxanda, living in London, she has started dressing the European elite, particularly around London and Paris. And then this was seen as something empowering. It was seen as, First Lady is the extension of President. As such, fashion is used as a very direct form of soft power. And in case of Michelle, this was used, of course, and our First Lady is, looking at designer from this forsaken country. We don't even know where to put it on the map, and all this. And when then Melania does it, it was like, oh, this is so anti-American, And of course, we know that Trump's campaign was "Make America Great Again," it was. I think it would have been much different.
Yeah. And that off-white bell sleeve dress by Serbian-born, London-based designer Roxanda Ilincic, rather than one made by American designer she chose. She bought it herself through a net-a-portier.
Yes.
And according to a spokeswoman who also told that she isn't working with any designers. So the dress was immediately sold out online, of course. And we all also know that Michelle Obama wore several outfits from the same designer. And let's talk about Roxanda Ilincic for a bit. So Roxanda studied architecture and applied arts in the University of Belgrade before moving to London.
Well, yeah, Melania started studying architecture here, right?
Yeah, also, yeah. Where she graduated with an MA in women's wear from Central St. Martin's. She is the brand of choice for some of the world's most high-profile women. Why do you think that is so?
I think because there is still a lot of exoticism in the West and the post-colonial discourse in fashion, but as well because Roxanda is, same as several other designers from this part of the world or from Eastern Europe overall, are breaking with the tradition by at the same time accentuating it.
Yeah.
So, as I said, we had Macron's wife, we had Kate Middleton, and two first ladies of America. I would love to see Jill wearing it. I don't know how would she look in it, but I think everyone can look good in Roxanda. I think it's just because partially there is a lot of form and colors in her designs, and this is what she always accentuates.
Yeah.
But there is also something that looks eminently different. And as we saw on Michelle Obama looking like Dizalašica in that photo. So I think there is some sort of allure to her design.
Because she said, my roots are very closely tied to the DNA of the brand. And growing up in Serbia, where women are unapologetically very feminine, I came to London and realized that I wanted to keep this feminine element, but give it a twist and challenge ideas of classical beauty. So that is...
Yeah, but it's funny to see how this can resonate both with Melania and Michelle.
Yeah. While traveling to Texas for an announced visit to shelter housing children separated from their parents in the USA, as we've seen, she wore Zara jacket with this message, and also this custom blue Ralph Lauren suit of her husband's presidential inauguration. A source that Ralph Lauren, who asked to remain anonymous, told Glamour, we immediately started to get complaints about Melania Trump wearing the label. Do fashion labels need to be careful about who is wearing them?
Well, as I said, yes and no, because I want to believe that fashion is the highest form of democracy because it's so close to our bodies. And if we can't express ourselves unapologetically, because really our clothes technically do not alter anyone unless someone is really allergic on like some part of like technical laboratory part of our clothing, so they might die from it. But what we wear is someone else's projection, and I really think that this message was important. But yeah, there was even nowadays, if you're gonna join some Facebook groups like fashion historians or fashion museums, and when they would post a photo of Melania or Michelle, the administrator immediately disables the comments it's like, we don't comment. I was like, yeah, but if we can comment on like Queen Elizabeth, or if we can comment on, and if I posted, for example, a photo of Tamara Vučić's president, Serbian president's wife, or your new president, I don't think they would know who this is, even though these figures are as well problematic. But I saw this, and then there was a lot of backlash with designers. And I remember there was a call to lynch Dolce & Gabbana, were very unapologetically and openly taking pride in dressing Melania and Melania Trump. But I think these as well fashion houses are very immune, because if we didn't cancel Chanel fashion house over Gabrielle Chanel being a literal Nazi, I think we can cancel them for Melania Trump wearing their jacket.
And the last question, what do you personally think, or what is your opinion about Melania's fashion style? Not only as a former first lady, but also in general.
Well, my question to all of you, at least those who identify as Slovenes, would be, what is your, where is fashionista? Where is Slovenia in Melania Trump's style? Where is, not necessarily did you wear fashion designers from Slovenia, but was there something in her that made you feel proud, that you were like, this is our lady of the East? As far as I'm concerned, I think that she will probably remain the most fashionable figure. Of course, we have Jackie Kennedy and we have Michelle Obama, who look different but have remained very fashionable. Of course, Joe Biden is much older and she comes from educational background, so she's putting some effort, but I'm not liking it. It's just my opinion. But I would rather invite you all to think about, because she is from our country, from your country, where is Slovenian fashion and Melania, and where is Slovenia identity that I personally did not see, but maybe that is something else. Were there feelings of pride, of joy? Were you angry? Did you feel that the West is going to cancel you because Melania is from Slovenia, or something? So maybe we can conclude this with this open question to you, my fellow Slovenians.
Great. Thank you, Stefan, for this exciting conversation on such an interesting topic. So we are moving forward to the next presentation, which will be held by Associate Professor Dr. Jasminka Končić, who will be with us online with the theme on fashion migration identity with 3 approaches to clothing design. Since 2001, Jasminka Končić has been working at the Faculty of Textile Technology, University of Zagreb. 2011, she became an assistant professor at the Department of Textile and Clothing Design. She has been exhibiting independently and collectively at home and abroad since 1996. In working with the medium of textile, she calls into question its connotative meaning in contemporary art. Archetypal connection between the textile and the seamstress, the housewife and the mother, is the foundation of most of her works. Therefore, the textile and different techniques, such as sewing, embroidery, and cross-stitch, became artistic tools she uses to analyze topics closely connected to the nature of a woman and her hybridized role today. Dela Ramage will present her contribution with the title Fashion Migration Identity, 3 Approaches to Clothing Design. Welcome.
Hello, everyone. Okay, today I'll introduce you with the work of 3 younger designers who will introduce their work to wider public with the exhibition Fashion Migration Identities, which was held in Vladimir Nazor Gallery in Zagreb. The exhibition presented the collection Exvonia by Damir Begović, Rebellion Silence by Mateja Bosek, and The Invisible Path by Ana Krgović. In 2020, all of they were MA students on Faculty of Textile Technology at University in Zagreb. These young designers used cultural identities of African, Asian, and Croatian migrants as a conceptual foundation for the design of contemporary fashion collections. The first one is collection Exvonia by Damir Begovic. And as an introduction to the collection, I'll show you the Exvonia exhibit video. Just a moment. In this video, we can see that Damir Begovic collection is inspired by lowish Slavonian folk costumes as an homage to designer's home region. Damir Begovic uses folk costumes as a personification of his own cultural heritage, his origin, but also as a synonym for the current mass depopulation of his home, Slavonia, as a direct consequence of the people's migration to more affluent parts of the European Union in search of a better life. The starting point for the design of Damir collection are the traditional elements and handiwork techniques of Slavonian folk costume. We can see gold and silver thread embroidery. For example, on the left, we can see the photography of traditional gold thread embroidery, and on the right, we can see new digital and 3D sculptural interpretation of them in Exvonia collection. The other traditional elements are krilca, šlinga, molovanje, glass sequins, and križara scarf. On the other side, Damir Begovic collections is inspired by haute couture as a personification of Western affluence. In order to capture the mood and character of fashion silhouettes, he employs the photo collage technique for his initial sketches. He designs sketches by cross-referencing visuals from the golden era of haute couture and authentic Slavonian folk costume. Garments are mutating into clothing hybrids that impersonate the newly emerged hybrid identities of migrants in their new environment. This hypothesis is further supported by the fact that faces in most sketches are void of identity and personality, covered by scarves and textile patterns in mega dimensions. The next collection, which I will introduce you, is The Invisible Pet by Anna Krgovic. The Invisible Pet resulted from the designer's research on interculturalism and migrations between the European and African continent. The designer focuses her research on the Mediterranean migration route as one of the deadliest migration routes. Anna Krgovic places emphasis on danger by using second-hand waterproof textiles and a symbolic circle associated with the concept of movement and the metaphor of a lifebuoy. Anna Krgovic clothing successfully combines elements of African cultural heritage with Eastern European manner of dressing, whereby she repositions African textile patterns and ritual clothing silhouettes into Western European fashion silhouettes. The designer contrasts the African cultural identity with the Western European one through a palette of colors and the color-intensive textile pattern, which she creates digitally using the aesthetics of the cultural heritage of sub-Saharan region, Kente cloth, and Adinkira symbols. On the one hand, the designer emphasizes the body's physique, its anatomical values, and distinct fragility and fatality with anatomical clothing silhouettes. On the other hand, in the Invisible Pet collection, we find extremely ritualistic silhouettes similar to oversized ritual masks that erase every element of individuality and personality from the body of the person who wears them. Krgovic designs her fabrics in blue yellow, blue red, black red, and white black, red color, are combinations and symbolic meanings of the colors of the original Kente cloth. The collection Rebellious Silence is the next collection, which we can see on the exhibition by Matea Bosek, focuses on questioning the role of aesthetic and ethnic elements from Asian clothing cultures in the context of West European culture and clothing styles. The designer uses garments in her collection to question the sustainability of an identity, the sense of not belonging and globalization as a threat to cultural and national identities in the West. The collection Rebellious Silence questions the paranoid perceptions of aesthetic futures of Eastern culture and immigrants living in the West. The designer researched traditional women's clothing in the Middle East, particularly focusing on the veil in Islamic culture and question of covering the woman's body. The collection Rebellious Silence puts the veil in contact with contemporary fashion and grants it the freedom of choice. The designer deconstructs the veil and modifies it into a hood. Also, Matea Bosek deconstructs traditional decorative fragment of Islamic art and put in new contemporary context. Next. If we have enough time, I will show you another film. I will conclude that through three different approaches to fashion design, the exhibition Fashion Migrations Identities addresses and questions the influence of dynamic contemporary migration trends and interculturality in the context of fashion design. It has been shown that the face is the focal point, perceived as a personal identification card, which greatly speaks of our cultural and national identities. We can see a new body and changes through the dynamic process of migrations. Thank you.
Much. So, several studies demonstrate that migration plays a crucial role in self-discovery through fashion because individuals may sustain, change, or incorporate various cultures in developing their own style. What is your opinion about that?
Can I see on Croatian?
Znano je da studije migracije daju vlogu da posamezne skupine...
Ne, mogu vam ja govoriti.
Aha, se slišimo?
Je, malo prekida, tako da...
Aha, prekinja, ja. So I'm going to the next question. Do we renounce our own national identities by leaving our domicile?
Dakle, naši identiteti su onako definirani sredinom u kojem živimo. Granica unutar Europe postaju međe. Ti identiteti zapravo počinju migrirati i poprimati sasvim neke drugačije konotacije. Ono što je zanimljivo i što smo mogli možda vidjeti u radovima ovih mladih dizajnera je zapravo propitivanje uloge promjene tog identiteta i uloge adaptacije, prilagodbe samom nekom novom, dakle, području i njegovim kulturološkim zakonitostima. Tako da to postaje pitanje koje je sve dominantnije u modi i ono što je zapravo bitno reći je to da identiteti, da se oni mijenjaju i da postaju neki hibridni oblik koji isto tako kroz medij odjeće i odjevanja poprima jedan sasvim zapravo drugi kontekst.
Aha, hvala. So, as I started the question to demonstrate that migration do play a crucial role in self-discovery through fashion, and individuals may also sustain and change and incorporate various cultures in developing their own style. So, how to translate traditional clothing into contemporary fashion design? And is there a fear that modernity will overtake authenticity?
Dakle, ono što je bitno kad se poseže za etnobaštinom kao nekakvim nacionalnim preslikom, simbolom nacionalnog identiteta, tada zapravo je pitanje koliko on može biti modni, koliko može sa sobom povlačiti pitanje mode zbog toga što je tradicionalni narodni kostim zapravo kategorija, jedna nepromjenjiva kategorija odjevanja. U tom kontekstu vrlo je važno prepoznati elemente koji se mogu modificirati i postati modni elementi. Često puta oni poprimaju sasvim neke druge siluete i tehnike produkcije nego što je to zapravo slučaj u izvornom načinu oblikovanja. Dakle, tu su, kao što smo vidjeli, anatomska silueta izrazita koja je simbol još nečeg drugog osim samo odjevanja. Znači, ona je simbol nekakve zapadne afirmacije tijela, što narodni kostim zapravo kao takav niti nema. I ono što je dakle bitno, to je da su zapravo sve tradicionalne tehnike nekakva mogućnost za reinterpretaciju kroz nove oblike oblikovanja. Ono što je bitno za modu, to je da ona ne smije nikad preslikati doslovce elemente nacionalnog identiteta i preuzeti iz narodnih nošnji, jer zapravo tada samo dobivamo replike u odjevanju ili neke krivo citirane načine odjevanja koji često puta završavaju i u kiču i u nekom nesporazumu i nerazumijevanju, estetskom i konceptualnom. Tako da ovoga treba biti vrlo oprezan u tom preuzimanju elemenata i njihovom konceptualnom prerađivanju u suvremeni modni izričaj.
Okay. Thank you very much for this conversation and wishing you all the best on your professional path and such great projects.
Thank you.
The next presentation will be held by Professor Dr. Salvatore Luca Losico about national identity in fashion, China, an exploration of the concept of country of origin made in China and its connotations among Generation Z. Luca Losico, MBA, PhD, currently lives in Hong Kong, where he teaches fashion marketing and management. Previously, he was in Atlanta, USA, as professor and associate chair at SCAD University. Dr. Losico has lived in London for more than 16 years, where he was course director of 2 MA in fashion businesses at University of the Arts, London. He has a wide international experience, having taught in several countries such as New Zealand, France, and Italy. Before starting his academic career, Dr. Losico has worked in the fashion industry for companies such as Gucci, Valentino, Fendi, and so on. His publications and articles center in his research interests, which include the evolution of luxury brand management and the development and application of teaching models to improve creativity in academic environments. Salvatore Luca Losico will present his contribution on the theme National Identity in Fashion, China, an exploration of the concept of country of origin made in China and its connotations among Generation Z. Welcome.
Can you hear me? Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Perfect. So I want to start saying that this study on Chinese national fashion identity started from a constant desire of mine to constantly implement inquiry, teaching, and learning. So the opportunity came when the opportunity came with the exhibitions at the Hong Kong Museum of Arts about the road to the Baroque, the Capodimonte Museum collection. And for me, the opportunity was exceptional because under the same roof, we had the Western and East cultures because we managed to visit. I brought my students over there. We managed to see the Western artifacts, but also the permanent collections that obviously involved about Imperial China, painting, calligraphy, landscapes, and so on. So we had the opportunity to look at both sides. The visit was preceded by a presentation of mine on the notion of luxury in East and West society in the 18th and 19th centuries. Then a questionnaire was handed in to 140 fashion and fashion business students of PolyU, the university where I'm teaching at currently, with the specific questions related to fashion Chinese identity. In these studies, we used a social constructivist approach, which emphasized the interdependence of social and individual processes in the co-construction of knowledge, with the goal of understanding learning with a social environment. Using narrative inquiry as a selected methodology, I also decided to add 3 interviews of key opinion leaders to seek additional evidence leading to greater validity and reliability. Fashion has a key role in enabling Chinese Generation Z to construct and express their identities, especially in cities where they have the opportunity, as Barrett mentioned in his work, to mingle with crowds of strangers. Responses from the questionnaires confirmed our feelings of a new Chinese, more aware identity made of different fashion choices, shaped by a rediscovering of its own multicultural heritage, cultural exchanges, and international connections. As I mentioned previously, the opportunity of visiting this exhibition for me was exceptional, not only because we visit West and East at the same time, but also because in response to the Baroque exhibition, the museum organized and asked to 3 artists, as you can see here in the slides, 3 artists to have a modern contemporary interpretations of the exhibitions. So this juxtapositions of multicultural environment, reinterpretations, analyzing certain things for me was important and actually was extremely beautiful. And especially it helped a lot of the interaction after when we led the workshops with the students. Indeed, the conversations led to focusing on reinvestment values, and something that it would be interesting to discuss with you guys in terms of Eastern European fashions, reinvestment values versus cliche, the cliche nature of made in China. In scrutinizing the cliche, I realized its ambiguity, which highlights the transnational connections within the labeling system. And 2 main key elements emerged: transcultural dynamics that needs to be taken in consideration, and the friction that at the moment China is cultural frictions that China is experiencing. So in the context of fashion, a respectful made in has a strong impact on its affiliations with national identity. From the research, most appealing tag for my students, for them, was made in Italy, ironically. I didn't plan, I didn't on purpose, but this was what came out from the research as synonymous of luxury, while they still had the concept of made in China as a poor quality and cheaply manufactured. So for me, that's why also having made in Italy and made in China under the same roof, the same museum, for me was important, because this would emerged during the class conversations. So so while conducting these studies, an experiment which I want to repeat this coming semester in order to have a full year investigations, I was asking myself, how can Chinese fashion identity be understood if Chinese identity is unclear? And also, can we speak of culture, heritage, and creativity with China collectively? You know, can we generalize? Can we say one thing? Well, we can't. Transnational and transcultural exchange are the foundation of contemporary China. Following the decade-long cultural revolutions came the lifting of travel ban. So from Taiwan and Hong Kong travelers to mainland China in the 80s. As a result of the lifting, Taiwanese and Hong Kong travelers learn about contemporary China firsthand, but they also taught the Chinese much about contemporary lifestyle, quickly embraced by Chinese people. This intense interaction led in 1993 to mainland China's first fashion week in Beijing. Also, this transcultural exchange has cultivated China's contemporary lifestyle and popular culture. So, what emerged in early discussion were two main key focus. The first one was that Generation Z clearly distanced themselves from the government, from politics, from the communist regimes. They don't associate themselves with that, but rather they prefer to embrace China as a place, race, and civilizations. And then the second point that emerged was the heterogeneity of Chinese cultures, ancient and contemporary expressions, multiple contradictions and repetition on histories engendered by art and fashions. During the research, two main key items emerged that the Generation Z embraced, and I experienced also in the street, in class with my students, but also some of my colleagues, they tried to reinterpret this kind of garments in a very creative way, in a very contemporary way, even using knitwear or other type of fabrics. One is the magua jacket that you see here in the slides. If you look at the picture in the middle, it's a short, traditionally, the heritage jacket is a shortened jacket with 5 buttons and wide sleeves, while obviously in the contemporary way is worn and reinterpreted with this multicultural exchange happening. For girls, what emerged was the use of pleated skirts. In particular, this one from the Cantonese regions that was worn on formal occasions together with trousers and jackets. This kind of style, let's put it this way, of this kind of reinterpretation, I also experienced in class, on the streets, and among my peers and colleagues that I work with. And this, in a certain way, confirmed the phenomenon of TikTok, Instagram, Chinese street styles. Oh, sorry, the slides went a little bit off. That we see and everyone is talking at the moment. You know, there is a famous article in the Esquire magazine in 2020, and it's really something that I can see on the streets. Today, the political tension between China and the two Chinese regions, Hong Kong and Taiwan, is creating further conflicts and discomfort. The phrase "made in China" has entered a new phase of geopolitics, particularly reflective in the notion of Chinese identity. This has created a rupture with the notion of Chinese identity, particularly for the Chinese outside the People's Republic of China. Despite the cultural and social relevance to some, many have viewed it with suspicion and skepticism. This has led those with the Chinese descent to simultaneously mobilize and dissound their Chinese identity. And this kind of embracing heritage and culture, Chinese culture, has clear evidence in the way how millennials and Generation Z wears. We see, or what my personal experience and living here and also through this study shows that, for example, millennials embrace more European brands and wears labels from top to toe, while Generation Z are looking for niche local brands. And I will show you a couple of examples in a minute. Obviously, the pandemic has exacerbated the problem further. So I just want to show you, I don't think we can see this. There was a short video of a TikTok of guys walking through this kind of reinterpretation of contemporary heritage, Chinese heritage, embracing cultural through fashion. I also, as I mentioned at the beginning, I had conversation with key opinion leaders that you see mentioned here in the slides. And what emerged was, through this conversation, was that China is clearly a diverse composition of many cultures that all seek to respond to a desire to partake in the global agenda. And this is something that, for example, the Slavic fashion that I was listening before the presentations is something that I feel they should also be part and trying to have a stronger desire to partake in the global agenda, in the global conversation. The interaction of local and global forces with respect to cultural norms and values is constantly mutating in the trans-global landscapes. From both answers and discussions, a different set of value systems needed has emerged. While the heterogeneity of culture, heritage, and creativity may be acknowledged, those from a different cultural background are also part of the contemporary reality in China, what they call the others. We have to look at China and Chinese identity as a space of connections. And this is what really both Blondie and Tracy mentioned in their conversations, in their presentations. So as I promised, I wanted to give you a couple of examples. This Kenny Wong, that is a retail owner that created his own retail brand and launched his own brand called Growth, Ring and Supply. He decided to create a reversible jacket mini capsule collection, collaborating with Jerry Kung, that it's ironically taking in consideration the history of the relationship between Japan and China. We all remember the troubles during the Second World War. Jerry Kung, where they created this reversible jacket with the dragons. But what most intrigued me of this brand, and in particular his owner, Kenny Wong, was his vision, his brand vision that really reflects the cultural and the feelings and the mood of the contemporary fashion identity in the new generations. And in particular, if you look at what he writes here about in his website, we can see not only the new concept, what in Western we call the new concept of luxury, made of authentic aesthetic, made by hands, attachment, emotions. We all remember Roberts talking about love marks rather than brands. And the attachment of nature, observation of nature, something that we experience in the landscape exhibitions in the museum. That is part of the observing nature, is part of the artistic experience, feelings of historically and contemporary as well of China. So, and he's also here in he reinforced his concept of new luxury. He says pursuing something that has value, preserving tradition, including handmade cultural crafts, building foundation upon craftsmanship and story. And this is something that I'm really happy that I'm mentioning these things, because they are so, in a certain way, related to what you all were mentioned and saying before my presentation. So, with this, I would like to conclude that so far my what I can say is that the heterogeneity of Chinese cultures, ancient and contemporary expressions, multiple contradictions, and repetition of history is engendered both in art and fashions. Just as there was no Chinese nation state before the 20th centuries, indeed, as we know, we have, and this is something that also came out during the research and the discussion, the workshops that follow the visits and the questionnaires, we have 56 officials ethnicity in China, with each one with their own cultures, traditions, and differences. Transnational fashion narratives are embraced by the Generation Z, as emerged from the study, as China and the rest of the world cannot be taken, analyzed, or discussed separately. The new contemporary fashion identity is what I suggest is a transformation in progress, made by international connection and heritage. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this presentation. So, if you agree, I would like to give you some short questions for the debate. So after a visit to the Hong Kong Museum of Art Exhibitions, which we have seen, a questionnaire followed by a workshop with 140 Fashion Generation Z students, a forum was held to question the associations they have about a concept of made in China. So Generation Z, also called Gen Z, Zoomers, I generation, Centennials, post-millennials, or homelanders born between 1997 and 2012, is known as the most photographed generation, and it is said that Generation Z is more self-conscious in terms of their fashion and its environmental impact than other generations. Would you agree with that? Or should I say, what are the main characteristics of this Generation Z?
Well, I absolutely agree. You know, there isn't, there was, while we were listening, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. So I was saying that while we were visiting, the main action, the main interaction for them with the arts, the crafts, the different rooms was an opportunity for them to take a picture. So it's absolutely an element of their characteristics. In terms of what I experienced during these studies, that I can see that they have a clear identity. They really separate themselves from politics. They are not very much engaged in politics, but rather in rediscovering their roots. They before the let's say, the communist era. One of the, I was quite surprised, happily surprised, to discover that some of the major TV program followed by the Generation Z are the new, but they are all South Korean production. The new historical movies about China, how it used to be. And then they try to remake and recreate some of what they see, and they in this very well loved TV series, because that's what they are, in their everyday clothes.
So this is very hopeful. This generation is very hopeful that this label made in China, which became a stigma, that this stigma would eventually fade away.
Yes, they are. What we don't know yet in the West, in Europe or in the States and so on, is that there are actually, I'm discovering every day new brands, new fashion designers, local fashion designer and local fashion brands that they have a completely different approach compared to previous ones. Those ones that, for example, they were just replicating the Western collections or copying the Western collection. They have a completely new approach in their design process that include the revaluing their heritage. And and also what I found really interesting, that they have this from a managerial point of view, because this what I teach, I teach mainly marketing and management and sociology of fashion as well. What I experience is really that they are kind of like preparing their army to invade the West with these new brands. They are not well known or completely unknown in Europe or in the States, in the Western world. But they are really kind of spending time refining their aesthetic in a way that reflect this new contemporary Chinese fashion identity that is, as I mentioned before, a mix of multicultural exchanges and heritage.
People really enjoyed products from China. They viewed projects such as tea, furniture, dishware as unique. It was a quality product and there was a cultural value. But when China became a world factory and produced so many items for so many brands, people changed their views. Why?
Yeah, this is something that I was surprised that my students didn't were fully aware. As we know, and that's why I did a presentation on the notion of luxury in the 18th and 19th centuries in West and East. They were not aware of the fact that actually before the max productions and before these recent changes in the Western world, having something from China was the most luxurious things that you could possibly have. If we go around in Europe, there are so many palaces or villas from the aristocracy, the nobility, and so on, that they have even dedicated rooms, all decorated in what used to be called a chinoiserie, means inspired by China. It wasn't really accurate, but it was an inspirations of China, of what Asia looked like to the Western world. So this was really a surprise for them, and for myself, understanding that they didn't realized that. They thought that China was always commerce, mass productions, even in the exhibition, because there is a specific exhibition that I don't know if you can see. Let me. There was a specific exhibitions about. Oh, sorry, called a shopping paradise, where it was an interactive exhibitions, ideal for younger generations and children, where clearly was presented the fact that yes, they were producing, they were commercializing their product, but actually their product had an intrinsic value of high standard that they didn't felt. The only thing that they noticed was commerce, the money, the value, how many they will sell, how much the price. They always were keen to look into the economic aspect rather than the nature of and the essence of the products, the articraft, and the value, the intrinsic value of the Chinese products that we saw. So this is a kind of a difference that I also noticed, because in the Western I feel European. I always say, "Where are you from?" I'm European. We European, when we like beauty, we see beauty, we admire beauty, and we appreciate beauty first of all. Then perhaps on a second step, we look at the economical side of what we are doing. But for them, it's the other way around. They immediately look at the economic aspect. They want to understand the economic value, and then their appreciations and their additional values that an artwork implies.
Thank you very much for this lovely conversation on such an interesting view of this topic. Wishing you all the best on your professional path.
Thank you for having me, and I hope to see you soon, all of you, in person.
Yeah, we too. Bye-bye. Now I would like to welcome our last participant of today's symposium, Assistant Professor Dr. Iva Jastritijević, who will present us with the theme of sustainability and anti-consumption rhetoric, fashion and consumer-resistant identities. Welcome. I'm sorry, CV. Assistant Professor Dr. Iva Jastritijević is currently an assistant professor in merchandising and digital retailing at the University of North Texas, Benton, US. Her research is focused on sustainability and transformative, cooperative, collective, and personal behavior. Her academic mission is to challenge the status quo in fashion industry practice, contributing to a transformative implementation of its sustainability agenda, which should help improve the way we source, produce, promote, package, use, and reuse apparel and textiles. The second, but certainly not less significant research that Iva has pursued is grounded in the interdisciplinary domain of social psychology and cultural anthropology of dress and body, with the focus on the body, identity, appearance, and culture. Iva Jastritijević will present her contribution on the research topic of sustainability and anti-consumption rhetoric, fashion, and consumer-resistant identities. Dear Iva, welcome.
Hello. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, we do.
Okay, my connection is a little bit unstable, so please just interrupt it if you cannot hear me, but I hope everything will be good. Okay, so Yes, I'm really honored to be here, honestly, because yes, I'm currently living in States. Actually, I live here last 8 years, but originally I'm from Balkan region. More precisely, I'm from Serbia. And I'm really familiar with everything you're doing over there. So I wish I was able to come in person, but unfortunately this time we are meeting online. So thank you again. Yes, last 8 years I was exploring mainly sustainability and specifically sustainable consumption and production in fashion industry. And here at University of North Texas, previously I was employed at Ohio State University. I was researching consumer movements that are happening in a recent past here in America. So this presentation will really mainly apply to US context. So what is sustainability? If I want to provide just basic explanation of this term, I would say that this is not the term that officially exists, but I'm proposing it as really needed term to explain one social and ideological movement that I can see that was formed in the recent history, American history, as opposition to consumption and more precisely overconsumption in the fashion industry that we can really track in the last 2 decades. So I will really try to be brief and leave enough space for questions. So I have a next slide. I'm not sure if I'm supposed to change the slides or you, but let me try. Okay, so here is a short outline. So first, I will just briefly explain what I refer by using term sustainability and opposition to consumerism. And next, I would like briefly to talk about anti-consumption movement and its roots in America. And after that, I will explain why I think that context of pandemic and post-pandemic is ideal space to explore anti-consumption. And lastly, but not less important, I will be talking briefly about my current research that is really focused on sustainable lifestyle in the fashion industry. And that lifestyle is emerging among fashion activists. So if we are thinking about fashion industry, I'm sure you know that impact of the fashion industry is enormous. And if we are thinking about fashion from ideological perspective, we can say that fashion is really one paradigm where things are used and discarded very soon. So it means that if you want to visualize fashion as ideological system, I would say that there is a linear line where things are produced, they are used, and they are quickly discarded. And if you are thinking about last, let's say, maybe 3 decades, we can see these very short micro trends where things are just trendy or fashionable for a week. And we can see that growing number of fashion retailers are promoting weekly trends. So on an annual level, we can track almost 52 micro trends. And especially Gen Z consumers, and Dr. Luca was really presenting great things about Gen Z consumption methods. So I really agree that they are consuming a lot and they're consuming fast. So whenever they're leaving home, they have a need to wear something new. So that's why we can really track overconsumption trend here in America. I was doing recently one study called Clothing Mountains among Gen Z consumers, where I was tracking what my students are purchasing and how quickly they're discarding. And I found that among 800 students, the total investment in new fashion items during 3 months was 800,000, and they discarded every fifth fashion item they recently purchased, and they were wearing new fashion items on average 5 times before they discard them. So that cycle is really vicious cycle where things are, as I said, sourced, produced, used, and discarded. So very linear model. And then in opposition to that model, if we are thinking about sustainability as a science and philosophy and lifestyle of slow and mindful consumption, we can say that in a visual sense, that cycle is really circular. So things are sourced responsibly, they are used, and then after the usage they're reused. So we have that kind of closed loop system where things are constantly in the process of usage, either for their primary purpose, or sometimes they can be repurposed or upcycled or recycled, so they get a new meaning, but still they are in the usage system. So what I see in the American market is really interesting fact that almost 25% of consumers are so-called sustainability supporters that live a really mindful lifestyle, which is, as one of the famous authors, Duane Allgin said, inwardly rich and outwardly poor. So not poor in a negative sense, but really frugal. So it means that those consumers really maybe consume what they need, as opposed to consumption that is based on desire, never-ending desire. So anti-consumption movement in US is nothing new. We can track subcultural styles that emerged after the Second World War. And also in the recent history, we can track growing number of consumers that are boycotting fashion brands, that they are part of what we call here cancel culture, and they are supporting mindful consumption, slow consumption, anti-consumption, or emancipating consumption, or sustainable consumption. There are so many terms that are used interchangeably, even though their meanings somewhat are different. So there is a common characteristic among these emerging lifestyles that we can, and one of the most common value is resistance, or these days of consumption. And I would say that this resentment is both attitude and behavior, because it's not just I prefer not to buy this jacket, but I will not buy it in reality. So we can see that it is not just intent or attitude, it is also reflected in consumer behavior. So why some consumers opt out? There are multiple reasons, and I will be talking about them later on when I discuss my current study. But I just want to say that this anti-consumption lifestyle, or slower consumption lifestyle, is not easy to adopt, because we are surrounded by stuff, and the marketing activities are really forcing us to buy new things because we really need them. And many of the things we are purchasing every day are not really functional. So most of our, let's say, purchases sometimes are not based on our needs, but more on our wants, right? So how we can opt out? Once Max Weber said that this anti-consumption lifestyle can be just adopted by heroic individuals. And after doing this kind of research, I really agree, because I had the chance to interview a lot of fashion activists that adopted slow or anti-consumption lifestyle. So why pandemic is a perfect context to explore anti-consumption? Well, what I saw is that, and I assume in Europe is the same thing, that during the pandemic, everything was really a challenge. Life as normal was challenged, right? And consumers had a lot of time to really question what they want to prioritize. So we saw that consumption overall decreased during pandemic, and the same thing is happening now post-pandemic in America. We really see that fashion brands are struggling to maintain the same kind of I would say sales and monetary values they got before, prior to pandemic in 2019. So they are really struggling because consumers are not buying as much as they used to buy prior to pandemic. Most of people start working from home. They don't need maybe to change dress so frequently. And also we can see that during pandemic in particular, if you remember, stores were closed, fashion brands were canceling their orders. So there were simply scarcity of things, and you cannot buy whatever you want because simply it was not possible at that particular moment. So it did change consumer priorities, but also it did the question the dominant approach to consumerism. So there is a really great theory called voluntary simplicity. I was using it to really as my theoretical background to explain what is happening among these sustainability supporters. And I really want just briefly to introduce this theory. So voluntary simplicity as a theory emerged in 1980s, and it was created by Dual Elgin. And scholars are using this theory to explain some common values among sustainability supporters. And these common values are really something that we can describe in the following way. So first thing is material simplicity. So people are intentionally deciding to consume less and to buy just what they need and not necessarily what they want. The second characteristic is human scale. So people, as Luca was talking recently in China context, consumers are buying local products and they really want to have interaction with the seller. So they are really slowing down their consumption and they're investing in things that are locally sourced, locally produced in order to communicate their different identity that is formed in opposition to mainstream, let's say, fashion identity. Then the third characteristic is self-sufficiency. So in a fashion context, it would be reliance on what we already own in our wardrobe. So we don't want to invest in new items, we will just use what we already own. And then ecological awareness, I would say that this is really common characteristic among sustainability supporters because they do have increased awareness about all problems that we are seeing in our environment. And you know, you're familiar with global warming and all other lack of water and pollution. So personal growth, intentional decision to invest in spiritual growth and not so much on material possession or economic growth. And research on voluntary simplicity is relatively new in American context, but there are groups, let's say, that are actively participating in cancel culture. So I was mainly interested because I'm part of Remake Fashion movement here in States. So these are fashion activists that are trying to challenge the change and support the change in the fashion industry. So I was exploring how they are actually trying to boycott Black Friday and what are their reasons not to consume things and not to purchase anything new during the Black Friday when there is really force almost to buy new things because of huge discounts that are proposed by fashion retailers. So I was interviewing these fashion activists that are acting as a part of fashion remake movement, and here are brief insights in their thoughts. So I was asking them why they're not supporting new purchases, why they are against consumption. And here are some of their answers. I will not read them, but I will just summarize the main findings. So there are a couple of themes that emerge in the data. And the first one is perhaps the feeling anxious about how much things are first placed on the market and how much people are consuming, trying to fulfill their inner gap, which cannot be fulfilled with material possessions. So as a consequence, consumers who are over-consuming were feeling empty. And that's why people who are fashion activists and who support sustainability, they opt out of that system. The second thing that emerged in the data is that people from consumer perspective, they feel exploited by the fashion industry. So it means that they feel like a waste, and until they have money, they are in the system, and then when they spend all their money, they exclude it, and then new consumers are used for the same purposes, and mainly for the purpose of profit generation. So also these consumers that decided not to consume new fashion products were talking about feeling uncomfortable with living in a world of global capitalism. They also feel like entitled to change something. So very often they were very active and even proactive in their intentions to change dominant system of fashion. And very often they are very expressive, so they're not hesitant to share how they and why they opted out. So if we want to describe them visually, because I did include the word rhetoric, and rhetoric is always manifestation on dominant ideology. So if we are thinking about, let's say, semiotic analysis of the garments that are worn by fashion activists and sustainability supporters, I would say that we can really roughly categorize them in three groups. So the first one are thrifters. So these are fashion supporters in a way that are very much committed to buy only already used garments, so nothing new. So they're not necessarily against consumption, because they are, of course, still dress, everyone is, right? But they are supporting slower consumption and mainly consumption of already produced garments. So they don't want to contribute to that circle of vicious consumption where you are just buying constantly new items. The second group of consumers are minimalistic consumers that are really curating their capsule wardrobes, I would say. I was conducting experiments with my students last 3 years, seeing what percentage of Gen Z students is willing to wear capsule wardrobe during the school semester. And I was really surprised to see that almost like 30% of the students are really wearing their capsule wardrobes, which consist only of 30 garments. So this is what I mean by saying there is really trend of minimalism among even fashion students, where again, students are opting out, making any new purchases, but they are making capsule wardrobe of clothing that they already own. And the last group contain anti-fashion environmentalists that really are wearing only something that we can describe as uniform. I'm sure you remember fashion anti-style, which we called anti-style, that emerged in Russia, where we saw and we can track utilitarian dress. So I would say that these anti-fashion environmentalists, they're wearing that kind of uniform that is really functional, and very often in just include simple jeans and a white t-shirt and a sweater. So nothing really very loud from a semiotic perspective. So very, very decent colors and very simple look. And I would say that this kind of fashion activist demonstration you can see all around US, and particularly on college campus. So I don't know if this will remain anti-consumerism and sustainability lifestyle will remain dominant just among 25 consumers, 25% of the consumer body, or it will increase in the future. But predictions are telling us that perhaps there will be steady increase in consumers who support sustainable lifestyle, and we predict that that percentage on an annual level will be somewhere around 5%. So we can say that this lifestyle is here to stay, at least in the States. This is the situation. And I will stop here and I will let you ask questions if you have any. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Thank you for this lovely representation. Criticism of consumerism is thus a critique of the accumulation of goods through desires that can never be realized, as you mentioned earlier, since the consumer process is nothing more than the production of ever new desires. Ultimately, therefore, such criticism is always neo-Marxist in the sense of a false consciousness that produces false needs. So is consumerism a new form of economic exploitation?
If I need to be bluntly honest, I would say yes, it is. Because consumerism is ideology, we all know that, and those new needs are really produced and constructed. And as I said, I think that this kind of activism is really needed, at least among us who are employed in the fashion industry or fashion education. We do need to speak up and just request at least a small change in the system, which is really needed. Because if you think about fashion industry, there is so much dirt in there. And it is not just environmental exploitation, it is also social exploitation. I don't know how much you're familiar with the hidden supply chains that are actually hidden in the Balkan region. I didn't even know that, let's say, my country is producing garments for many luxury brands. And I was living there, I didn't even know that. So I would say that this system is really exploitative, and sustainable fashion is trying to challenge, question, and at least support some minor change in the system.
Yeah. People all over the world have started demanding more of fashion. In recent years, unsafe working conditions in factories around the globe have provoked outrage, and fashion revolution has us asking, who made my clothes? And brands have started to respond with corporate responsibility strategies in international commitments. Is fast fashion slowing down?
No, unfortunately, in speeding up. I was recently at the International Textile and Apparel Association conference, which is the biggest conference in our field in America. And there was a presenter. I cannot say the name, but the person is a professor at one of the universities here in America, and the professor was proposing the new concept of speeding up fast fashion. So not having weekly trends, 52 trends, micro trends per year, but having daily trends. And I was really very, very discouraged with that proposal, because if you see that many people are seeing benefits which is endless and that are mainly profitable, I mean, this is so sad, right? Because then when we're gonna stop with exploitation? And like you said, yes, living wages are still not achieved in major countries that form a supply chain in the fashion system, and so many people are exploited for the sake of fashion, fast fashion mainly. So I do expect to see alternative. And here in America, there are so many local brands, in China as well, I heard recently. So, and I suppose everywhere, that kind of local anti-movement is really obviously happening as alternative system of mainstream fast fashion.
Mm-hmm. What about resale and rental and outlet stores? Is this a part of the solutions?
Yes, absolutely. This is part of circular system where things are used after their primary life cycle. I'm sorry. Here is still early in the morning, so I'm not fully awake. So yes, resell, reuse, repurpose, upcycling, recycling, are all solutions to a problem. Because if you think about garments that are already produced and never sold, this is around 30% of the things that are produced. So if we want to measure quantitatively overproduction, we can say that intentionally fashion retailers are creating 30% surplus. So these are things that are produced and they're never sold. So what we are doing with these items, here in States, mainly brands are burning them. Some brands are having these secondhand or resale or outlets stores. Let's say Ellen Fisher, this is B Corp. They have a store called Renew where they are upcycling their unsold merchandise and they are reselling it. But this is a local B Corp corporation. What about mainstream retailers? Very often they are not upcycling or reusing their items because they think they're gonna dilute the brand aura, and they're gonna discount their goods, so those goods will not be desired any longer. So unfortunately, we don't see so many resells happening here in America.
And my last question, what does it mean to be responsible consumer?
I think this is the question we should all ask ourselves. I know what it means to me. And I can just speak about myself here in this case. So I can say that I was really questioning a lot my purchasing habits, and I was really trying to buy what I need. I have luckily many fashion design students who are creating great things, and I like to purchase from them. And in that way, you always have something unique, which is handmade and which is really high in quality, very durable, because in the mainstream fashion market, you cannot find quality things any longer. Everything is so cheaply made that, of course, students are discarding things too quickly because they cannot survive, let's say, 3 drying processes in the clothing dryer. So I would say changing what we can change and questioning what we cannot.
Thank you very much for this pleasant conversation on such an interesting and current topic. Wishing you all the best on your professional path, and thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
So I would like to thank all the participants for their contributions on today's symposium. Thanks to the audience as well. And I want to conclude. Clothes can carry many significant signs according to their shape, color, surface, decoration, embroidery, techniques, etc. And each one can be the expression of identity over ethnicity, religious beliefs, age, education, and social class. Through observation of clothing styles over these items, the assumptions could be made about a person's identity. Fashion and clothing is a field where clothes are used to create and reveal a cultural and social identity. And this point has been going on from ancient times, and it will also go on in the future too. Thank you again. Have a lovely day, a warm December, and a very kind new year.